Ohio and welcome back, and for today's review I have the retro edition of Headmaster Hardhead and Headmaster Mindwipe. These are alternate reissues of the Titans Return Headmasters that we'd gotten before, but with awesome retro boxes and different heads, as well as some different paint apps. So I want to spend some time with the boxes of these, and then compare these editions with the previous edition, and see if they're worthy of your collection. So let's go ahead and start with Hardhead. We have this package here. I really love this art. I would love to see this to become a pretty commonplace thing. And of course, it is a way for Hasbro to continually trick us to buy the same figures over and over again. But regardless, it is a pretty great looking box. It has that grid in the background and some color splash, almost like a pixelated in the background. And we've got the alternate head, the Headmaster on the side. On the top, we have the transformation, which is actually pretty interesting. Pretty much showed the simplified version of that. And one thing I do like is that the Transformers logos is, of course, Autobot and Decepticon versions. Then on the back, we have the same image, but what's really cool is they have their individual tech spec, which has their sort of bio, or at least their function, and then strength, intelligence, firepower, and all that. And on the sides, we have both modes. Yeah, this is really cool. I think these boxes are awesome. So, on the note of that, let's get them out of the package and see how they stand up next to the previous release. And here we have Mindwipe side by side in his alt mode. And there are several touches on the new version I really do appreciate. First of all, the purple is much more vivid. It's much more of what I expect from Decepticon purple, where this one is a lighter purple and does make it feel a little more toyish. That color is also broken up. We have this really rich brown that's used in here, as well as some silver accents, different color translucent plastic, as well as different color feet. So all this sort of works together to break up the bat mode and make it a little bit more interesting compared to the previous one. Of course, all articulation retains the same, and the weapons go in the back just like before, with a little tail gunner where the Titan Master can fit inside. The one thing that does stand out to me that I think I prefer on these alt modes, on the previous version, is if we look closely at the head. So the new head has these very bright eyes. The actual panel lining looks a little bit more distinct, and it could be caused by the color. It could also be plastic composition and whatnot. But I do think the details stand out a little bit better on this one. But one thing I really do like, I do sort of like the muted eye a little bit better, but what I like the most is this blend that goes into the ears. I like how that color change goes there. But you can also see that the ears themselves are a different shape. This one curves over, where those are the standard ears they were before. And it does make me wonder if it was a retooled mold or a whole new mold. But the mouth gimmick retains the same. You can see inside the mouth a little bit. But they're both still very cool. This one looks a little bit more evil. It actually, due to the color, reminds me a little bit more of like the vampire bat you might consider with Dracula or something. Another difference, and I don't know if it's molding or a defect, is the tips of the wings here. So as you can see on the original, they're straight. They're pretty standard. Well, on this release, or at least my particular one, they're curved. So I don't know if that's warping from packaging or manufacturing, or if it's meant to be that way, because if you look at the other side, it does have a little bit of a curve to it, but it's not to the same extent. But this is sort of a rubbery plastic that's used on the tips here, and it does make me consider that, well, very likely it was something from the packaging that made him do that. And I might, if it does affect transformation at all, take a hair dryer and sort of heat that a little bit to sort of get to return to its normal shape. But let's get a little closer look here before we move on. We have a Decepticon decal. Actually, not decal, it's like a tampo. This darker purple plastic, which makes it look less like a cockpit or coffin, whichever this is supposed to look. And it still opens up where you can put a Titan Master in there, which is a pretty cool idea. It's like a flying throne or coffin or just a robot cyber bat that flies around. But it's minor changes. I do think the silver on the thrusters is a little bit nicer than using black. But overall, I would say there's some good improvements in the coloring of the new version versus the old one. And there's another difference actually I want to point out before we move on. And that is where they didn't apply paint to the shield piece here, or tail, however you want to look at it. But they did on the previous one, and I do like that touch. It just makes it seem a little bit nicer when they're side by side, but it doesn't really affect the overall look at all. Let's go ahead and see how these guys compare in robot mode, though. So let's get a closer look at these Titan Masters here. So we can actually see that they used the exact same mold, but they painted his eyes and face, and that alone helps it quite a bit. The purples look a little bit closer here, but they are different. I'd also like to think that the blacks are different. This one seems a little duller compared to the newer one. The new one seems like it's a bit more vibrant. And then when we flip it over to the faces, we can see that there's a completely new face that they made. It's sort of personal preference. This one has sort of larger cheeks, different kind of mouth, as well as different details for the helmet that goes around the face. And there is our complete versions. So they both have their same weapons, a pistol and shield. And I showed you the differences in the shields earlier. But we can really see how the bots are broken up a little bit differently. And you can kind of wonder, I mean, this is all personal preference about what you're going to prefer. The bat mode really seemed to stand out more, where there's some areas due to lack of, like in the legs, less paint that don't stand out as much. But it might feel a bit more animation accurate to some people, and that might be what they want to go for. Now, if you haven't handled these figures before, one thing to be note of is they are a bit back heavy, so they can easily be toppled backward, and you kind of have to find a sweet spot for them to stay on the display. It might not be a huge issue for some, but it's just something to consider. Overall, it's pretty cool. I like what they've done with it. What it's going to fall down to is personal preference of which version you rather have. And if there's one that you prefer the body of the other, of course, like all of them, you can swap their heads out. I actually was using a different head on mine that I preferred to the head that was on the Titan's Return release. It has pretty good articulation. Leg stance is a little bit limited so far as posability goes in that respect, but the arms are fairly articulate, and it does have enough of a dynamic look to it overall in a standing pose. So its engineering may be a little bit dated, but it is a solid piece nonetheless. But let's go ahead and move on to Hardhead. And here's Hardhead in his tank mode. And this is going to be a little bit difficult because the original Hardhead was really good as is. It looks like they had actually broken up things mostly in the same ways. But what we have here differently is we have painted sides that breaks it up. Though I would have liked to see the treads maybe in a different color, or at least the tank track part of it, to sort of make it stand out a little bit more. And of course, the canopy here, instead of being all plastic, or all translucent, we have it painted on the top. But for the most part, they're similar enough where this mode, you might not even really notice just how different they are. But in this configuration, the weapon goes inside, the Titan Master can go inside the weapon as sort of a little cockpit. And then of course, if you wanted to, you could open this up and have another Titan Master stored in there. It rolls around decent enough. There's a little bit of articulation in the cannon, and the window opens. They are solid. So what this will really boil down to is what you prefer the look of, and they're pretty similar. I like them both. I do like the darker green in this one, as well as the paint on the sides. However, I do think I prefer this slightly lighter color for the gunmetal parts a little bit better. Other differences would be the Autobot logos. They're larger. And of course, this one's a different color. This is really nice how this one has the silver outline. So they both, in vehicle mode, have some plus and minuses. I think in this respect, they're both solid winners, and it's really going to boil down to what you like. Let's get a closer look at these Titan Masters. So this is one case where the Titan Masters actually... this was a really prime one as far as having the face already painted and all that. So this one on the right, while it's the same molding, it seems everywhere, it has a little bit more broken up, with the forehead being painted and the different tones being used here. But for the most part, this part doesn't stand out all that much. But when we go to the face, we can see that there's a completely different face. And in my opinion, I really like the new face much better. The old one always seemed a little bit weird to me, and I really think it's because this area seems so small compared to his side vents. And I just think that they did such a great job resculpting this face that alone makes this the version I would already pick just because of the new head. But let's go ahead and get his body into bot mode and go head on. Now here in bot mode, you really see the big differences. And we'll go ahead and start with color. So we have the darker green, the darker brown, as well as how those colors are broken up. So the one thing I'm glad they retained is this piece here, because that was actually what I was most impressed with on the original figure, is this level of paint and detail right there that just felt a lot more premium than what we were getting with some of the figures. But they did change it up a little bit. They have this part here. They don't paint the center silver. This is a bit smaller on this one, but the chest, it still has the broken up area here, though it is green here. Autobot logo is different. And we have tampos here on the thighs. Another thing that's interesting, the arms are really good on the original release, but those green hands did stand out. And what they've got here is a lot more color separation. So we have a bicep that is the brown, the painted sides. Then we have brown that separates the green from the hand. And so there's a lot more color going on the overall figure, and it makes those green hands a little bit more cohesive. They don't stand out so much as compared to previously. But even with all those changes, I'm really happy with the original body, even with the arms all being the same color. And if all they changed was the head, I think it would be worth the purchase just for the second head. But this really feels like, you know, you could consider it an evolution of the character or whatever, if you wanted to sort of imagine it that way, or just someone else completely different. But with that said, I do think it is a great improvement. Out of both of these, even with having the previous versions, this is one I would probably recommend more so than the others, just because it is different enough and it's just really cool. Not focus on all the positives. We have to consider some of the other issues, and that would be, like a lot of these figures, it will be a little bit back heavy. So you have to make sure you pose it in a manner to where he just won't fall backwards all the time. And of course, they lack some dynamic posability in the legs and stuff like that because it is some older engineering. While the arms and stuff might be fine, and the weapons and the ports and those gimmicks, fairly up to date as far as that goes, the legs from this generation were a little bit more primitive in what they could do, but they still look good because they had cut the feet in a way to where they had a dynamic stance. So as a standing figure, it's fine. Now let us know in the comments below if you think the new retro version is a great successor to the previous Titans Return version, and if it's worthy of your collection. But like always, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.